Welcome to Greenville Academically Speaking, a weekly presentation by the University Center of Greenville at McAllister Square, designed to showcase the teaching and research interests of faculty from the center's 7 affiliated universities. Now your host, Joan Martin.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us again here on Greenville Academically Speaking. I've looked forward to the second program so much. Our guest is fascinating. All our guests are terrific, but Dr. David Shaner is just a fascinating guest, and I know you'll find him or have found him fascinating to listen to. He's professor of philosophy and Asian studies, as well as the chair of the Department of Philosophy at Furman University. Thank you so much for coming back again this Saturday.
Thanks, Joan. It's a pleasure to be here again.
This is wonderful. I just so different.
You're so excited. I'm getting excited.
You know, I was going to ask you to, usually I ask our guests to recap the previous week, but you covered a lot of ground last week. So basically, you covered the art of selflessness, being one with others, and you said, am I correct, monism?
Monism, yes. We were talking about Buddhist philosophy in that case, simply the idea that all things in this universe are interconnected.
Yeah, and how you got started. And I think
we jumped all around, Joan.
Yeah,
we were talking about my mother, my father.
Yes, that's true. But actually, it was chronologically, and I can see the connection between your mother teaching you different religions,
right,
and then going on to skiing, and how that worked in with the Japanese and so on. But all right, now let's focus.
Sorry,
in this
it's probably
week.
Confusing.
No, it just sounds overwhelming that one person could do all of this. But you have 2 books published already.
Yes.
And 2 more that a literary agent is handling for you. You're going to New York next week, I understand?
Yes. They're both the first 2 books, one was called The Body-Mind Experience in Japanese Buddhism, and that's kind of what we were talking about last week. It had to do with the idea of that our mind and body are one, not separate. Plato and Descartes would have us believe, these leaders in philosophical history in the West, that they're separate. And then the next book was called Science and Comparative Philosophy, and that's where I was interested. The scientific worldview also suggests that all things are interconnected.
Okay.
You start looking at quantum mechanics, and and so what I recognized early on, this was in the mid-'80s when I wrote that book, with 2 Japanese co-authors, by the way, I was beginning to explore the relationship between contemporary science and comparative philosophy, specifically Buddhist philosophy. But then we talked a little bit about... I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but all these things pop into my head. I can't really ask you to capsulize. That wouldn't be fair, but what is can you tell us the connection between science and philosophy, Buddhist philosophy?
Yes, it's all wrapped up. Now you're going to think this is strange, but I'm going to give you a fun term. You can say at a party next week.
Oh, great!
Praticitsamutpada Dhamma. What that means is dependent origination. It's the central philosophy of early Buddhism, and it's basically a theory of causation. This one world that we were talking about, this one interconnected world, things don't happen accidentally. All things being interconnected are also causally related. For every effect that happens in the world, there is a multiplicity of causes, some material, some social, some emotional. For every effect, for everything that occurs in this universe, there are multiple causes that have led up to that effect.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
It's just like in a scientific laboratory. I know we're jumping around, but it's fun. It's fun that way, right?
Yeah, it is fun.
If someone's driving the car and they don't, they're going, what are these people talking about? The most elegant scientific experiment has just one variable. You have a state of initial conditions, and then you introduce a variable. And the reason why
I see. Okay.
And the reason why that's the most elegant is that you can understand cause and effect. You kind of assume that the world is deterministic, and the reason why, this happened inside this beaker is because you introduced this one element, for example.
All right. Putting it into layman's terms for myself, instead of being in the beaker, I'm in the car in a parking lot, and all of a sudden another element is introduced, i.e. somebody rear ends me in the parking lot?
Yes. And you know what? We call that a car accident, but it's not an accident.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, it's not a car accident. There were causes.
So there were causes.
They weren't paying attention, or maybe your brake lights were out, and when you hit the brakes, they didn't see it.
So there were other...
The car has a certain mass. There's a certain coefficient of friction between the tires and the road. They were going at 40 miles an hour, and the physics of it all is it slammed into your rear end. It wasn't an accident. One of those causes was the driver not paying attention.
Inattention, right? Yeah.
So,
but that's just one element. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's a connection, because the scientific worldview, the scientific method, assumes the world to be causal, that the world is deterministic. Of course, I mean, we can talk about quantum mechanics and start splitting hairs here about indeterminacy.
Yes, but now how does religion enter into this?
Well, the Buddhist notion is that not only is the material world causally conditioned, but so is every other aspect of our life, because the whole universe, they would argue, is not just molecules and atoms or quarks. In other words, things moving in physical space. The Buddhist would argue social phenomena are real, emotional phenomena are real. The mind...
Such as? Give us an example of emotional phenomena.
Well, for example, let's say that you act and an effect occurs out of your action, okay? Just in daily life. Statistics would tell us that people, for example, who abuse their children were themselves sexually or physically or emotionally abused. So the cause is that the reason why someone might act out in a way and themselves become abusive is a deeper cause that is in their subconscious or unconscious mind that's still there, that's affecting your worldview. Your subconscious and unconscious is very real. And the seeds of your actions at consciously, you may not want to be abusive, you love your kids, but something triggers you.
So I see what you're saying. In other words, two people in the same situation, and I look at my friend and I say, how can you react to that like that when I'm so...
Right.
Yeah.
When we say we're emotionally wired, or this is the result of our upbringing, or a socioeconomic condition, or I'm looking at the world as a male because I am a male, and as opposed to a gender specific ways or racial specific ways, all of these are forms of conditioning that the historical Buddha would say still operate in your psyche. And so when something happens, maybe that car accident you just mentioned, maybe what the person was not even paying attention to driving because there was something else operating subconsciously that was having them focus on something else. So in any event, there are that book, to answer your question, is talking about the relationship between science and specifically Japanese Buddhist philosophy.
All right, now these are the two books that you've already written.
Yes.
Correct? But you've got two books in the works.
Yes.
These are the two books that are going to New York.
Exactly. I finished the books, but we haven't, I say we, I have I'm represented by a literary agency in New York, and they do whatever they do because this is intended for a general audience, and I've never written for a general audience before. It's not like going to an academic press where, anyway, the process is very different.
Oh, I can imagine.
And so I feel fortunate that I've already written the books. However, when you start working with these large publishing houses, I'm in the first grade here, but I am learning that you need to be represented by an agent, and they may want certain aspects, redone, or that they know how to appeal to a wider audience. And I wrote them. I'm thinking, okay, I've written academic books and articles, and I think I have something to say, and I'd like to share it with people. So I thought, well, I have to learn to write in a different way.
For the general public. But that's quite a coup to find a literary agent who is that interested. That's more than 50% of the publishing battle right there.
Well, I've been working on these books for some time, so I'd like to say, it just kind of came out of thin air, but actually it was the result of another causal process.
Another causal. You're right there. All right, all right. One of the books is Connect, the 7 Arts for Positive
Personal Transformation.
Right. And the other one is Connect, 7 Arts for
positive organizational
Organizational.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's go down because you've got, the 7 arts, and they have to be done step by step.
Yeah, it's just like any kind of strategy of personal change. Let me start it this way. Sometimes I tell audiences or my students this. I say, all behavior is addictive. Everything that we do is a function of this causal process. We live in patterns. We get habituated. And we think we're operating many times consciously, making good decisions through conscious rationality. But actually, there's so much of our consciousness that's affected by our subconscious.
Are you saying in
these
books that we can change?
Yes. And I'm also saying it's not easy. And of course, you go down to Barnes and Noble and you'll see, a huge section on dieting and, self-improvement, business improvement. Why are there so many books on this? Because people have a hard time actually sticking to a strategy to effectively change. Yes. What that means is breaking a habit. So what I tried to do in working with individuals is I kind of decided to step back and say, okay, what is it? What are you actually doing with these persons that have created this success with the people that have worked with you? And it's not just Aikido. It was a combination of things. So I basically sat down on my last sabbatical and I said, I'm going to write this book. So I wrote this book basically on effective strategies for personal change. Okay. And you're right. Each art is sequential. You have to do the first one and then the second one and the next. And the first draft wrote itself rather quickly, and I still had time on my sabbatical. So I kind of looked at it as I was writing, and I went, oh my goodness, these same 7 arts, if I just relabel them, it's exactly what I was doing working with businesses as well.
So they translate?
They translate. And so I sat there and I went, I better, get back into my office and start writing again because there's another book sitting right here. So actually, after I wrote the first book, Connect, 7 Arts for Positive Personal Transformation, and by the way, the publishers may decide to change the name.
I hope not. That sounds like a very catchy name.
Is it catchy? Yeah.
Yes, it is catchy.
Another one was Living with the Wind at Your Back. Do you like that one?
No.
Okay.
No. I like the
connect?
idea of the change because even in today's politics, everything is change and new and everything.
Exactly.
And we would like to pick up and move to another country, another place,
right?
Change ourselves.
Yes.
All right. Now, if we can go through these 7,
you want to talk about them?
Yes, let's talk about.
It'll take the whole show.
Well, that's right. I think I'm going to see if I can talk you into coming back for a 3rd show. Maybe.
Really?
Yes.
All right.
Well, we'll see. All right. First of all, preparation.
Yes. So let's talk about them one at a time. Should we talk about both books, like one art at a time?
All right. Yeah. We'll have to do it rather quickly.
Okay. The first art is the art of preparation. So if you're out there listening and we're trying to make it something you can relate to, this means if you want to change any habit, if you have a goal, you want to lose weight, you want to spend more time with the kids, you want to do this better at work, whatever, then the art of preparation is to really honestly, very honestly, ruthlessly honestly, look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you really willing to change? What are the steps? Are you really hungry? Because if you're not, if you don't have a clear vision of what it is you want, your habits, your subconscious mind will take over, and it'll just be, that 14th diet you tried that didn't work.
So hanging the size 2 dress on the refrigerator door is not enough. You actually have to look in the mirror.
You have to look in the mirror, and part of this is you have to be reminding yourself, figure out ways to remind yourself. And you just mentioned one, putting the dress on the refrigerator or something.
Really? That would work.
It's anything that will affect your conscious mind to effectively stay with whatever program and discipline of change that you want. Now, that's the art of preparation. At a personal level, we'll take maybe an unpleasant example, but let's say you're an alcoholic, and let's say finally one day you woke up. I don't want to make your listeners think, create a really bad image, but what if you wake up in an alley one day with vomit on you?
Oh, I know.
And you passed out, you blanked out, but that might be just the wake-up call that sends the person to AA. Because at AA, that's a very effective behavioral change process. Why? The first thing you do is you admit you have a problem.
I was just going to say I've had several friends that have gone to either AA or Gamblers Anonymous, and they tell me that the first thing,
NA, Narcotics Anonymous. And you see that's a beautiful strategy because it's about that honest look in the mirror,
admitting to yourself,
and daily. Let's say you might in the beginning go to AA meetings every night. And first thing you do is you stand up and you go, "Hi, my name's David. I'm an alcoholic." Something like that. Yeah. To remind yourself what is the mission. So the art of preparation is about that. On the organizational side, in the second book, like what does that have to do with business? Yeah. Well, let's say you're the CEO of a company and you recognize, the culture's broken. People are not motivated. There's no trust. They're not working hard. They don't understand the mission, or they don't understand the competition, or they don't understand that this company's about ready to get its lunch, eaten by somebody else. So I call it the art of assessment. Now, that's not taking surveys. That's actually going in to the company, interviewing one-on-one in a confidential fashion.
And not just having them talk, but understand what
the real
saying.
And say, as a third-party consultant, someone else can come in, but you have to set it up with the senior management that if they want to engage on this strategy, it's not going to be a weekend seminar. It's not going to be take a couple of surveys and you need to establish. Remember last week we talked about connect?
You're right.
You need to establish a personal relationship with the people to understand what is really going on in their heads, because you want to know where the culture is. It's in the heads of every employee, every customer, every shareholder, every stakeholder has a vision of what this company means and what kind of behavior is expected.
That would be a long process.
It is a process.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's more expensive too. But do you want to change or do you want to go through the motions?
All right.
And the employees will understand if we're going to go on a weekend retreat and change the culture. I'll say right here in front of all your listeners and anybody else, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
Because it shows a naivete about human behavior. Because if all behavior is addictive, then the first day you come into work and you begin to understand how people operate around here, discussions at the water cooler, you're going to get an impression of how people are expected to behave or not.
Exactly.
So that's the art of assessment. And both have the capacity of looking honestly either at yourself or the organization.
It's the preparation to go into this. Okay. The second one now is compassion. This is on the personal side.
On the personal side, it's compassion. And what that comes from, I've got various exercises and things that have to do with what we talked about last week, monism. When you begin to realize the degree to which you are truly connected to all things around you. When I come home from work at Furman and I come into my kids' bedroom and they're doing something, all I have to do is walk in and the energy of the room changes. Not because I'm, it's because I'm the dad, right? Oh, grown-ups here, dad's home. And I don't have to say anything, but their attention and the situation changes by my sheer presence. And it's the same with all of us in everything in daily life. But anyway, this art is about understanding the degree to which we are connected. And when you really understand that, when you really begin to, absorb that into your mind, your heart, your soul, what you recognize, again, is something we touched on last week, and that is, I begin to act towards you selflessly. Compassion is the result of understanding the depth of our connection.
So whether this is animal, mineral, whatever,
exactly,
it works.
Right.
You feel that connection.
And when you're overcoming an addiction, or even if it's the addiction is, I'm the second best in the world, I got a silver medal, but I want a gold. Guess what? You're going to have to change, right?
Yeah.
So we might even become addicted to our own training regimen, and you don't want to let go because, after all, you're the second best in the world. So that's kind of risky to change.
Right.
So there's a dynamic here that basically, why is compassion the second art? Because you know who you have to be compassionate to the most during your personal change process?
It's yourself.
Yourself.
Right.
Otherwise, you keep beating yourself up guilt, shame come into your head, and it makes it impossible for you to build enough confidence that you will, in fact, be successful.
So putting it on a level, I know our listeners are from the academic community, but we also have our commercial radio station listeners too, and putting it on a personal level for them. You're on a diet, you've made the preparation, but then step 2, the compassion. You look in the mirror and you say, oh, good grief, I weigh 500 pounds. I'm never going to be able, I look like a fat pig. The compassion to yourself.
The compassion is to recognize there are deep seeds. There is a problem. Mm-hmm. But you're addressing it honestly, and it's not going to change overnight. So you have to stay with it. Stay with it.
Yeah, that's the
part of that is
part.
Sometimes support groups. So I encourage people in the book to let people in, trusted friends, to let people in on your personal mission to change A, B, or C.
Right.
Now, on the organizational side, the parallel art, the second art, instead of the art of compassion, I call it the art of participation. Because starting with the interview process in the art of assessment, the first one, you build upon that, and because every single person in the organization was interviewed with quality one-on-one time, and I won't go into it now, but there's a process where everyone gets the result, senior management gets the honest feedback of what people were saying. Right. See, and what you're doing is you're inviting all levels of management from someone who just started yesterday to the CEO, to the chairman of the board. Suddenly now, when people participate and you let them participate meaningfully, you're really creating a compassionate work environment.
Exactly.
And when they participate, then they're willing to go to the next art, which actually in the business world is the art of accountability.
And translating
on the personal side is personal responsibility. So just to recap, on the personal side, there's the art of preparation, which leads to the art of compassion, which then, when you're truly compassionate and you understand the level of connection you have with everyone around you, what does that make you feel? Guess what? You're responsible.
That's right. Exactly.
When you're at home, how many people does it take to have a relationship? At least 2.
Yeah.
So you have to take responsibility for your role in a relationship. I mean, isn't that what marriage counseling is about? So it's to recognize the problem isn't just with, your spouse or your boss or your coworker. The problem, part of the problem, or managing the resolution to the challenge is you. So that's the art of responsibility. Right. And then on the business side, what's the parallel? I said the art of accountability.
Right.
So if you're going to be included as a meaningful participant in the corporate change process, and you're going to invest in people, their training and development, I think it's reasonable that senior management can have a level of expectation that in return for that genuine ownership, that you are accountable.
That's
because this is a business. Yeah. We can, train and retrain. But at the end of the day, if you're not able to perform based on the level of expectation we need to, it's time to make a change.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of a no-nonsense sort of tough love, kind of philosophy.
Well, let me ask you something. Where does ego come into this? Because to do the preparation, you have to let go of your own ego to prepare and say, I need to do this. Compassion is, I know I'm 500 pounds, but I'm going to be better. I can do that. You let go. The responsibility, and especially with the CEO, I mean, responsibility in a marriage. Two people. Well, I'm right. No, I'm right. I mean,
Joan, you hit the nail on the head. It's ego. Ego is the problem.
Yes. So how do you control the ego, or do these, if you thoroughly work each, I say, step art, you will.
You're gradually you're letting go of those attachments that cause either unproductive behavior in the workplace or unproductive behavior in your personal life.
Exactly.
Either way, if you're going to change a habit, you have to let go of the way in which you have been functioning.
Because we all love our own. I mean, I hate to admit I used to smoke years ago. I loved it.
Yes.
And when I decided to give it up, I didn't want to. I clung to that.
Sure.
And it was not only did it taste good to me, but it was a social prop.
Sure.
And I didn't want to give that up.
Sure.
And it was,
well, not only that, there's you got a biochemical addiction going on too. So it's even worse, right? There's nicotine.
I didn't even think about that, but I just thought, hey, I really enjoy this, and it's a nice little social prop, and it's something to do with my hands.
Sure.
I don't want to give it up, and I mentally threw a tantrum and pouted over it, realizing that this is something you cannot continue. Luckily, I didn't smoke that long. Wow. But whatever it is, it's very hard to let go of these.
That's why
the ice cream at night after watching television. I really love that. And it's hard for people to do this.
You're making my case. All behavior is addictive.
But you're saying that it can be changed if you follow these steps.
I have to comment. You made one very important point, and if you're a CEO out there, you'll relate to this, or anyone who's in a senior management position of considerable responsibility. Right. When I go in there and do these assessments, can you imagine the feedback? If you get a third-party person who's in the trenches, listening to people, spending an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours with people one-on-one, letting them completely download what's good, what's bad, what could be changed, what would I do differently. And you take all that information together, and you go back to the CEO, and I sit down one-on-one, because I don't want to embarrass them in front of their colleagues, right? But we have kind of a look in the mirror session.
And I bet you get resistance quite often.
I do, and if it's too much resistance, I don't have any interest in working with a company where I don't think it's going to be successful. Mm-hmm. So many times I let them know, we'll do the art of assessment, and then we'll have a stage gate. In other words, we can have a go, no-go decision. But I'm going to give you this feedback, and I'm looking in their eyes, and it's a question of ego or not. Is this person ready to accept responsibility for the truth of the dysfunctional state of their organization?
Exactly.
And if they are, and if they're willing to take personal responsibility and make visible changes themselves, because maybe they inherited it, or maybe they're really the problem.
That's true.
And so, it's kind of like these things combine, because you might then be doing the one-on-one personal coaching for the CEO at the same time trying to coach the organizational change.
Exactly. But it's the same thing whether it's one person, a CEO, or whether it's a marriage or what. And I can remember as news director, I'd get my small, and I had a very small staff, but you'd get them together and every now and then, and there were a couple of little glitches that I wanted to straighten out. Well, it was very hard for me to turn around and say, well, you're right. Because then in your mind you're saying, I'm wrong. I bit the bullet. I mean, I have to admit. But inwardly, I might have been smiling, and this is the way to do it, and I knew this was the best thing to do. But inwardly, I was like, darn it, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I,
Exactly.
So I can say, David,
Are we out of time again?
You have got to come back again.
we
all right?
We only did 3
I know
arts,
we only did 3. Okay. You're going to come back again?
I'll come back.
Thank you so much. Could we do 4? No. We better stick to 3. Our guest this morning has been Dr. David Shaner, professor of philosophy and Asian studies, as well as chair of the Department of Philosophy at Furman University, and author and so many other things, too. I'm Joan Martin, inviting you to tune into WOLT 103.3 FM next Saturday at 10 o'clock for another fascinating interview with Dr. Shaner. Greenville Academically Speaking is a production of the University Center of Greenville.
Greenville Academically Speaking is a weekly presentation of the University Center of Greenville at McAllister Square, a consortium including Clemson, Furman, Lander, Medical University of South Carolina State, USC, and USC Upstate. Greenville Academically Speaking is presented every Saturday morning from 10 till 10:30 here at 103.3 WOLT.